Quick round of intros. My name is Zach Hardy. I'm Director of Operations here at OnDefend, and I'm going to be the cruise director for today's webinar experience. I'm joined by Carly Sherrod. Carly is our Director of Threat Intelligence and Programs. Carly's experience ranges from hands-on keyboard as an incident responder to executive cyber leadership as a former CISO from North Carolina. We also have Ryan Tucker, who is a senior tradecraft engineer with OnDefend. Ryan is very focused on the actual practice of offensive security, including hands-on testing activity, as well as building the tradecraft that is present in the BlindSPOT application itself. A little fun fact here, both of them like to ride motorcycles on the weekend. So some adrenaline junkies here in addition to the strong cyber knowledge.
Exactly.
I gotta call it out, I just gotta say it. So OnDefend is an offensive cybersecurity company. For those of you who don't know us, I think a lot of you probably already do. Really, our focus is on innovative professional services and software products, really trying to help make our customers as safe as possible. And the way we do that is we go into and break into things and make sure that they actually work the way they're supposed to, which frequently they don't. So lots of great discovery there. As part of this mission, we actually created our BlindSPOT breach and attack simulation tool. So this is really an outgrowth of the knowledge gained from the professional services, but in an automated software platform. And where it really excels is in validating that endpoint defenses, things like EDR in particular, are working as expected. If not, developing some recommendations of how they can be made better, and then rapidly retesting them to confirm that those enhancements are in place and working as expected. So just kind of a quick overview of what we're going to roll through here today. We are going to build a simulation or just very quickly show how that's done within the BlindSPOT interface itself. We're then going to run that simulation, essentially getting like an initial baseline or first assessment to evaluate the posture of our EDR security tool. In this case, we're using CrowdStrike in our lab environment, but the same would apply for any other similar EDR tool. We're then going to tune that tool. We're going to make some enhancements to its posture in the form of a custom IOA. And then we're going to validate that that had the desired results. We're actually going to run the simulation again and make sure that we see the improvements that we were expecting. A few things to point out here. This is only one of many potential productive workflows through BlindSPOT. We just picked this one out because it was something that could be connected to threat intelligence so that we could use some of the excellent stuff that Carly does here to help do something valuable for the broader cyber community. We're going to do this in a testing environment, so this is not in production. And we're going to keep some time for questions at the end. So please put any of those that you have in the chat, and we'll address those probably 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the presentation itself. And with that said, Carly, I'm going to hand this off to you for kind of an overview of threat intelligence and our chosen threat actor.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. So sticking with the cheesy themes Zach picked here for cruising. So if we start our onboarding, I'd like to kind of dial it back a little bit and dive a little bit into threat intelligence from an overview within the cyber perspective. So I like to think of it as sort of this kind of three-legged stool where you've got like the swivel base where you can like twirl 360 degrees. And if you think about each leg being a bucket of threat intel, think about one of the legs is our internal intelligence. So you can think about that as your internal business intelligence, understanding your critical functions, where they reside and on what infrastructure. And then you can think of that second leg as, say, OSINT or open source intelligence that we often leverage. So things like blog posts or podcasting or anything that's really readily accessible to the community. And then that third leg, we kind of classify as like other sourcing. Other sourcing can be anything from, say, a human intelligence resource with trusted information, all the way up to some type of restricted form of a data stream. So you can think about things that might require a clearance or public trust or some type of proof of need. So if you kind of think of that in the broader sense, all kind of being that foundation of this sort of swivel. And the reason I wanted it to swivel and turn is because if you think about it as a feedback loop where this data comes in, we take it, we process it, we analyze it, and then we curate some form of a product. And the idea behind the product is either to kind of help us take some form of action on objective, either reactive and or proactive. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we took cyber threat intelligence, identified a threat adversarial group, and then we are using that in a proactive way with BlindSPOT and a simulation tool to help you actually shore up your reactive defenses. So the chosen threat actor today was monitored as Scattered Spider. A couple of reasons we did that. Scattered Spider, super hot topic right now. Most people are familiar with that adversary. But in case you are a little less familiar, the big TLDR for Scattered Spider is they're highly prolific e-crime adversary, meaning that their main action and objective is financial gain. They are industry neutral, so they typically don't target any one specific industry. So that way they could be at any point in time a threat to your organization if they have not already been. And then they're primarily known for their initial access, doing things like SIM swapping, even down to the mobile carrier level, all the way up to, say, things like targeted phishing around help desk and social engineering there. They also are known to be very rapid once they enter an environment and cause kinetic disruption. So when we think about kinetic impact, that could be data kidnapping, ransomware, or some form of extortion, or any combination of the above. So what we've done is we've leveraged our sources of threat intelligence into this tool, and we've worked with Ryan, our senior brilliant tradecraft engineer, to basically design a attack simulation within BlindSPOT on a subset of Scattered Spider common TTPs that have been published and that you can kind of look for within the open source intelligence community. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ryan to kind of walk you through this design of the simulation and how we're going to leverage it today to show you how you can fine tune an EDR.
Cool. Thanks, Carly. Can you guys see my screen?
We've got
Yes. Yes. Perfect. All right. So we have a simulation here that's published in BlindSPOT within the sim library. We're going to start off by running it so it can kind of do things in the background, and then we're going to take a look at some other features here in BlindSPOT. So running a new campaign is pretty simple. We're within the simulation library, within the Scattered Spider sim itself. Here we've designated it as for the webinar, and we'll just click new campaign, and we'll get this nice modal that pops up. We're going to give this a really fancy name, Scattered Spider run 1, and we have 2 endpoints here. We're going to run on the first one, and we're going to kind of just leave all of the rest of this settings and information metadata default. There's a lot of options in here. I'm going to say this a lot today. There's a lot to BlindSPOT, and we're not going to be able to go through all of it. We're going to leave it as a binary executable. We're not going to do any obfuscation or randomization, anything like that. So we're going to submit this and let it start running here. And then we're going to kind of take a look at what the build process is, how we go from intel to actually building out a simulation. So within the BlindSPOT platform here, we have a sim builder. And as you can see, there are some steps in here. This is where we actually reproduce simulations and build out the steps that we want to execute and test those security tooling, defensive tooling in the environment. So kind of going through this, we're going to create some directories. Threat actor's got to store files the same as everyone else. We're going to download AD Explorer. So this is really just a tool to explore the Active Directory environment. We're going to take a snapshot with it. This is something that a lot of threat actors do, but Scattered Spider is known and their OSINT directly points to this. So this is what we're going to do here. They gather a whole bunch of other environment information, domain trusts, local groups, who's in those groups, domain admins. They do credential dumping as a form of persistence, lateral movement, credential harvesting, whatever you'd like to call it. So here we're going to run Mimikatz in a custom way. We'll run shellcode in memory because we have to do some advanced things. There's also a downloader in here for Rustdesk. So RMM tooling is very hot right now, in addition to Scattered Spider. And a lot of threat actors are starting to use this because it's signed, it's legitimate. It's a very easy way to put something on the host and get it past an EDR or defensive tooling if it's not configured to look for it. Then they can start it, connect into it, and who doesn't want a nice GUI as opposed to having really hard configured C2s and rubber shells. So we download it here. We're going to come back to this. We're going to add another step. I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually add something. We're going to build out some files. We're going to do an encrypt on those files, and then normal PowerShell commands to domains that Scattered had at one point, although they'll probably resolve as not possible at this point. So that's pretty good. Adding a step's pretty easy. We're just going to click the nice blue plus button here, and we get this little pane that slides out. So there's a lot of modules in here. We're not going to go through all of them. We don't have time. We're going to simply use the run module, which just allows us to execute binaries and programs as if you're just going to double click on them. So we'll add a description in here. We're going to run Rustdesk, for remote management. We'll use a command prompt. And let me grab the command here. Nothing fancy. We're just going to invoke, home drive, home path. Typically it's the C drive. SS tools, rust desk. This is the path that we downloaded to in the previous step. There's also a number of different ways to link things in here. It's very hard to do this type of work without talking about MITRE. We can link to TTPs or TIDs. There's a whole list of them in here. We're not going to do any of that or get into thresholds and scoring or anything like that because, like I said, we don't have time and there's a lot. So we're going to mark this should be a log event and we'll click add action here. And we'll see here on the left, our new action got added. We're now going to download rustdesk and then we'll actually invoke it. We'll get that nice big rustdesk prompt. So that's kind of a 101 on the sim builder. Fairly simple to go from Intel to having a sim or a subset of TTPs for a sim and start testing things in BlindSPOT. So we ran that sim in the background. You can see here our SS run 1 is in a completed status. And we can go look at this campaign in simulation and how it ran on the endpoint. So again, there's a lot of colors in here. There's a lot of information that we're not going to have time to get into. So I'm going to give you kind of just a breadth instead of depth view here. You can see here all of the actions ran. We can click into them. Local group administrators as an example, and we'll just return, we see the response data. We see a lot of the time of execution, process ID, MITRE techniques, all of that fun stuff. Scoring is fairly simple in BlindSPOT. You can take a more manual approach if you want to go through your sim or EDR and manually score things here on the side. You can click on them and they will have a scoring metric assigned. It's a very long and arduous process to do it that way. There's other options. If you're a spreadsheet guru, you can download a scoring Excel. You can make your formulas. You can do automated cross-referencing.
To be clear, this is obviously the best way, right, Ryan? Like that, the
Yeah,
spreadsheet way?
definitely. Yeah. Raw
Okay.
data, structured data, and JSON is definitely not the way to go. Excel and CSV is the best. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Personally, I hate Excel. I'm not a spreadsheet guru. I'm gonna codify everything. So I prefer to just rip the security tool logs. You can download them and upload them in here. And as long as BlindSPOT supports that log type, it'll do automated scoring for you. So it's my 30-second spiel on scoring. Since we have data and this was run on a system with CrowdStrike, since that was what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to kick it over to Carly and we'll start looking at some data on the CrowdStrike side.
Ryan, one quick thing. If you have it up, maybe we could quickly look at that host where you ran the simulation.
Sure. So jumping to this host, immediately rustdesk fires, which means our step does work, right? Nothing surprising, nothing crazy there. We're just running a command prompt and going to execute the program. The reason we kind of did it this way, hacking really isn't a spectator sport. Staring at a black terminal isn't for everyone, and it's quite boring, especially when data is encoded like this. It's just text scrolling around in this terminal, so it's quite boring.
Unless you're wearing a hoodie in the dark, right? Then it's fun.
Yeah, motorcycle with helmet with the hoodie up, or a hat on top, sunglasses
with backlights. Very important. The lighting is key.
Yeah. No visuals at all. Yeah. So
perfect.
But this is kind of what it looks like. But go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I was going to say this is awesome. To your point, a lot of these activities are intentionally invisible, but the great thing with picking on this RMM thing is we get that nice visual of the rustdesk application itself having actually launched. Good, easy visual confirmation that yes, the sim worked. So with this, we're going to take a quick transition into a poll here for the viewership. Question here is, when was the last time that you emulated some specific threat actor activity as a way of evaluating or assessing the performance of your EDR tool? So in just a moment here, you guys should all see a pop-up modal. Yep, I see I've gotten mine here as well, which I don't get to vote because I'm a host. It's weird. I was really hoping to bias the data I was going to look at in Excel later, but I'm not allowed. But anyway, we'll give that a couple moments. And then once we've completed that poll, we'll move over to Carly, who will be able to show us what Ryan actually did from the perspective of CrowdStrike. All right, I think we're good on poll time. You're good to go, Carly.
Awesome. Okay, great. So as we kind of talked about, any advanced EDR or endpoint detection and response system, for people that maybe don't know the acronym, can really do a lot of the similar things. So they all have a fancy dashboard for swift triaging, especially if you're a defender. So if we're looking at this from a defender perspective, we just ran an attack simulation. I have some threat activity being noted on a host. And in this case, we're going to be looking at the host TRV10CS. So if I use this dashboard, you can quickly see here, I've got 3 new detections. So that's a quick alerting. And then if you look at the host ID, we can see, okay, yeah, we do in fact have 2 mediums, 1 high detection on the specific host TRV10-CS. So if I'm an investigator, there's a couple things I'm going to do from a security team perspective. The first thing is I want to kind of have an idea of what's happening. Like, is this actually true positive activity, or is this potentially false positive activity? And one of the things we do a lot as investigators for false positive activity is, well, is everything working as intended? Like, is my EDR tuned correctly? Is the sensor on? Is the host on? Or things checking in? Like, what's actually going on? So one of the things you can do within many EDRs is pivot to like a host management or host profile page. So in this case, what you're seeing is the host setup and management specific page within CrowdStrike EDR. And you can see I already have the host pulled up. There's a couple things I'm going to check. So 1, my host is online. Cool. The sensor version is good. It's within like N-2 of the operating system I expect it to be supported in. Everything else seems to be good. I don't have like a warning sign. A lot of times EDRs will give you a warning like, hey, you're running in reduced functionality mode, indicative of like a kernel update mismatch or some other things like that. I don't see anything like that that's flagging me as an investigator to be like, something's wrong. Okay, interesting. So one of the things that happens with EDR is that they always have what's called a prevention policy or policies that are attached to it, which we kind of all know, like in any terms of a tooling or a security stack, you have some form of configuration that has to occur. So in this case, prevention policy would be like the configuration policies that sit behind the endpoint security module of CrowdStrike in the terms of this EDR. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this policy. So we're going to navigate to the policy attached to this host in which I'm seeing activity. Cool. So if we scroll down this, I see there's a couple things that are checked. I see some things that are not checked. That doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It kind of depends on what exactly you're looking for from a security perspective. So scroll down, there's quite a bit unchecked. I'm going to kind of get to the meat of the tool. So when we get in here, this is like the actual area within the EDR, at least for CrowdStrike, that alerts you on, say, detection and or prevention. And what you can notice is that there's entire areas that are just completely turned off, or there's areas that are only in a detection mode located in a moderate level. So a lot of times with EDRs, and I think many people are familiar with this, if you've ever worked in any type of like blue teaming or even on the red teaming side, when you put a new tool into an environment, it's almost always going to come in what we call safe mode. So this is an example of like, okay, you've got your tool installed, you put it out sensors on your host, it's going to automatically be in this kind of safe mode, phase 1 level of prevention policy. And that's on purpose to make sure things don't break or there's no unintended consequence. Where we run into gaps a lot of times as security organizations is around resourcing. So sometimes you purchase like maybe the Cadillac, but you didn't get all the upgrades like the heated seats and like the nice radio sound system. So you don't have the subject matter experts to come in and be like, hey, you actually need to turn up your policies into prevention in order to actually block the thing that you're worried about. And so a lot of times we end up with these misconfigurations hanging out in the wild that we just don't even think about until you actually have real world action occur in your environment. So in this case, we already know if we're defenders, I'm like, holy cow, I have a gap already that I know in my policy. Probably want to go fix that in case there's other active activity happening right now in my environment. And then in parallel, I'm going to go do an investigation. Cool. So now if we try to like streamline an investigation, one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to pivot to whatever your threat hunting platform is. So in a lot of cases, like advanced EDR platforms, CrowdStrike is one of them, Microsoft's in one, others have similar features like this. They have a backend that allows raw processing of data. So here is our backend with raw process data of what's going on. And we're just going to literally, for the sake of a webinar, do a YOLO query. I don't want you guys calling me out on my query syntax. So if we just did a straight YOLO of the host name that we know is impacted within this specific example, we want to pay attention. This is also very important for EDRs if you're ever on the blue team side, is you want to pay attention to like what timeline you're looking at and then what actual time you're recording in. Most of us are going to hunt in UTC. It's the safest bet, but you can't always set right to whatever time zone is best for your organization or that you need to report in. We know we ran this pretty frequently, so I'm still just going to do the last 30 minutes and then I'm going to run for anything within this host. Awesome. Okay. So now I have kind of this like broader version of what's going on within my host timeline, and I'm going to go hunt on that. There's a couple things you can do, like you can always use, right, like pre-filled filter fields, like you can see over here in this left column that I'm scrolling. And there's some things that you can look at, like file name, command line. Okay, Domain Explorer, NL Test. Well, these are actually the two things that were detected on. But what we're not seeing is RustDesk. But we know from Ryan talking about it earlier, he 100% ran RustDesk within the environment. So that's kind of interesting because I definitely wrote to disk. So now what I want to do is to make this kind of quicker just for the simulation, since we know what we're looking for from an activity perspective, we're going to throw in our other yellow of RustDesk in combination, and we're going to rerun. Awesome. So now I actually do see the event. We have a timestamp, and I can actually do see there is a file name written there. So like, why didn't it show up? Weird. That's kind of how EDR tools work sometimes with query language. So this is why host timelining is really important. And also why having a baseline, like an attack simulation like BlindSPOT to run anticipated TTPs can like help you with tuning. So now that we've said, okay, we have the activity, we clearly have a misconfiguration or a gap in configuration on our policy side that we already talked about. We don't have things in prevention mode. We have things in detection mode that's low. We also have an activity that in this case is RustDesk that's not being triggered. Well, in this scenario, let's say that in our environment at OnDefend, let's just like make it up. Let's say that our only approved authorized RMM tooling is Splashtop. And any other RMM tooling that we see within our environment is unauthorized. Whether the intent behind it is malicious or not is irrelevant. But for this case, it's just going to be a RustDesk is not authorized. So therefore, I want to create something within my EDR tool that's going to let my team, my security team, trigger on that and triage that activity. So one of the things we can do is we can pivot to what's called creating a custom rule group. And again, a lot of other EDRs have this feature capabilities, just walks through a little differently. So in this case, within CrowdStrike, if you navigate over to the endpoint security module, which is the one that we're talking about right now, we're talking about endpoint security, you're going to navigate to the configuration section of custom IOAs, indicator of attack, rule groups. Awesome. So in this case, we're going to talk about this rule group here, BlindSPOT. And you can see I already have several custom IOAs or indicators of attack created. That's because for any of us who know and have worked with policies, they can take anywhere from 30 seconds to implement on a host to like 40 minutes. So for the sake of the webinar, we wanted to ensure that it was applied to our duplicative host. And so to kind of remind the team, we talked about we have two hosts. We have a TRV10-CS, and then we have a TRV-CS or -10-CS02, excuse me, that are essentially duplicative in resourcing and operating system. So they're running the same operating system, have the same resourcing. Only difference in this demo is the changes that we're going to make to policy and the creation of a custom rule group. So while Ryan is going to run now the simulation in the background for the CS02 host, I'm going to talk a little bit about the IOA, and then we'll toggle over to see what the difference looks like within the CrowdStrike console. Awesome. So we look at this specific one called Demo TRV RustDesk. This is the one specific that I want to show you guys. But whenever you go to create like a custom indicator of attack, they all kind of work the same. You can block on like network detections and or like process creations. In this case, we're looking at RustDesk specifically as a binary. So we're going to look at the process creation itself. We're going to have it just in detect mode, but you can see if I drop down, you can leave it in monitor, detect, and or block execution mode. And then obviously it needs a name and or a rule description. And then in this case, the indicators of attack are just basic regex. So there's a couple things to think about here. When you are on the security defensive side, ideally, you do want to make a granular regex-based indicator of attack. However, when you are just starting to get malicious activity in and you don't have a lot of insight from a security team of what is happening, you just know that that specific tool should not be there and you don't know where the adversary is running it or anything more specific about it. I do recommend starting with more of a broad-based rule. So you can see here, I have wildcards in all my additional upstream parents for the processes. And then all the way down to the command line, I have this upstream indicated by .star and then RustDesk for anything that basically is going to trigger on RustDesk. I want you to fire me a critical detection in the CrowdStrike console so I can go take a look at it. So we essentially save that. And then there's a couple other things just to call out since we're in indicators of attack that I think a lot of teams sometimes miss around the configuration. And we're talking about shoring up your configurations by using the BlindSPOT tool. A lot of times what happens is that in your actual rule groups, you have to attach them to an official policy, and that policy actually has to have official hosts or endpoints attached to it for it to work. So what that kind of looks like here is you can see, okay, the policy status is enabled. Great. We have it specifically for Windows hosts in this case. And we can see that it is attached to the TVM policy optimal. So if you remember, I showed you when we had all the checkboxes or lack thereof checkboxes, it said TRV policy. This one's optimal. So it is enabled into our optimal policy. Cool. So the other thing we want to do to make sure that when Ryan ran that simulation that it worked as intended, we're actually going to navigate to a similar screen, but in this case, you can notice the host is different. So this is our CSO2 host instead of our TRV first one. And if you scroll down and we do the same thing, okay, we see host status online, workstation's good, version is good, we're within that N-2, everything seems fine, but our policy is optimal. So let's go check out that policy. What does that policy look like? Sweet. All right, so first thing I notice, I have several more boxes checked. There are still some that are left open. Again, that's probably okay, depending on the posture, but a lot more is checked. And then we're gonna get down again to this me. And the first thing you should really see here is not only is my detection turned up to aggressive, whereas originally it was in moderate, but I also actually have prevention on. So now when Ryan runs that simulation, not only should they be detected in CrowdStrike at a more robust visibility for the security teams, but you should also actually get prevention on the actual endpoint itself. Okay, so with that, the simulation should be good and we should be able to toggle back over to our dashboard. And yes, you can now see the difference kind of immediately with these flashing critical alerts here in the summary. And you can see it's indicated by custom intelligence via indicator of attack. You do see the host ID is different. This is on TRV 10 CS02. So that's that custom rule group for the regex that we did Rust desk on. But the other thing to note is you do actually see one additional high detection, and that's going to be directly related to what we turned up in the specific policy. So remember, we only had 2 mediums and a high before we did the policy update. Now we have 2 mediums and 2 highs from the policy update too. So you get a much more visible picture from what is actually going on within the behavior within your environment from this kind of fine tuning of the alerting logic and the policies. And just to kind of show you what this looks like, if you wanted to quick pivot to the custom indicator and what it actually triggered on. So you can see here, the reason we left it broad too, is that it didn't actually just trigger on the binary itself, right? It's actually showing you the commands that are being ran. So if we had done something really, really specific, and maybe if we had used, say, that home path, that would have been wrong because we needed to use the file path specific to the EDR for the custom rule to work. And that's actually a big got you in a lot of EDRs. For anybody who might be on the security team side, a lot of times you'll want to do like the official file path, like C, X, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of times you want to make sure like the actual file path within any of your rule groups is specific to the environment of the EDR, which in this case is going to be that device harvest volume 2. And then you get into the actual like user file path. Awesome. Okay, so with that, that essentially like ends the visual, like technical demonstration, but I did kind of want to just talk through a couple of things from my personal experience to just kind of wrap us up before we go into Q&A, which hopefully you guys have several of those. So not to like harp on it too much, but I know Zach highlighted a little bit that I have exposure in a little bit of different areas from like hands-on keyboard response, security, blue team side to former CISO. And for me, while this isn't a product pitch, I would say that what I really like about BlindSPOT is I think of it like a multi-tool, like something I just wish I would have had in my actual arsenal as a CISO. And here's why. I think for any fellow executives on the call, a lot of times you run into budget, compliance restraints, and then restriction on just general resourcing and time. So if you think about like just being out, like I'm going to relate it to the woods, you're out in the woods and like you have the choice of a tool, you either get a multi-tool or a knife. Like I'm going to take the multi-tool. I get the knife, I get the screwdriver, I get all other different types of products. And that's what I kind of see BlindSPOT as. And so from putting it in that hat of like a security perspective, what we just showed you was that I can use it for tool baselining and third-party like neutrality type of auditing for my tools. So I already have my security stack. Let me go run a simulation and do tool baselining. Let me go like train up and make sure my configurations and my policies are what I expect them to be. So I have proper visibility. So that's the main use case we showed. But it also hits things like from executive level, like compliance and assurance. A lot of times you need assurance from governing bodies, or you need to provide compliance for third-party integrations with data sharing. It also allows for things like you can pen test on this. So I can make a more advanced, a longer simulation that walks way through more TTPs, right, of any type of adversary you're interested in, and like have that be an actual test. So there's all kinds of different use cases. And I just wanted to kind of share that from my experience, I really think that there's a really cool space here for BlindSPOT, and it would have been really awesome to have had that in my former roles. So anyways, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Zach and see if we have any questions.
Yeah, Carly, that's fantastic. I know that some of the team here are going to put up a poll here for the audience, just kind of getting some input on of those potential use cases that Carly listed, which of those kind of seem to resonate the most. Carly, it's really worth saying, like, it's great to have someone like you on who has such a diverse range of experience, right? You see this all the way from, as the operator, how do we actually make the improvement, all the way through how do we realize that value in terms of actually moving an organization's security forward, not just the technical, but beyond that as well, which is fantastic to have. So we'll just give this a couple more minutes here, or a few more seconds, excuse me, for the poll questions to wrap up, and then we'll actually be able to view those on the screen. I won't overdrive the cruise ship here and say, full ahead reactor at 120%. Just kidding. What cruise ship has a reactor? Just so that way we can all see kind of what the team is thinking collectively here. And then we'll move into those additional questions. So, all right. And looks like security tool baselining along with SOC training are the leaders, which is great. And yeah, to that point, like, those can both be done concurrently, right? You can evaluate the technical configuration and see who's actually responding to those alerts that are popping up on the dashboard, especially the nice bright red ones that we just created based on that actual scattered spider threat intel. So that's awesome. So that's great. I'm glad that the audience is also seeing that value as well. And we'll just kind of move over here to a couple more questions that are in the chat. Looks like I see one. To run BlindSPOT, does the organization need to have their own red team capability? So no, that's actually one of the great things about how BlindSPOT works, and OnDefend as a company, where essentially we're able to take some of the expertise of people like Ryan and Carly and put that into the application in the way that you can access just with a few clicks, like Ryan showed at the beginning. We also have professional services where you actually might end up talking to Ryan about motorcycles for an hour, and essentially a baby purple team exercise where he will or others on the team will be able to run BlindSPOT on your behalf, and essentially the team will ensure that you get a really useful output without having to go through full licensing of the SaaS or things like that. Ryan, I know that you and I frequently end up in those working sessions together. I'm trying to think if there's any funny stories we have from those. I think there was one we did a couple months back where we had some system that the customer was helping us use as the target, where we had a technical problem, but the technical problem was literally the Ethernet cable. Do you remember the one I'm talking about? And like we like basically saw like the packets somehow hop like across the gap.
Yeah.
It was the strangest thing. I don't think we ever lost like the team's video share on that computer, even though we had to like have them change out the Ethernet cable so it would then work. It was wild. I couldn't explain it. But all right, here. So we'll look at the rest of the chat here. Not seeing really any other questions, just a couple comments. So with that said, guys, I think that looks like we've gotten through our agenda here. Not seeing too many other questions come in that we should address. I think we're good to wrap up for the day. So everyone, thank you so much for attending. I know we'll be able to post recordings of this. If you have not already done so, please be sure to engage with OnDefend social media. And yeah, with that said, actually, let me back up just a second. I'll turn this over to Carly and Ryan to share any additional final takeaways. Sorry, guys, just trying to drive the ship a little too fast here.
Did you just like crash us into like shallow waters? Is that what you're
Oh,
talking about?
yeah, maybe a little bit. I just wanted to
Wanted
get to the
hang out
dock.
at Fiji longer, Zach. Jeez. No, I don't really have much to add. I mean, it's hard because it's a webinar, so I can't see people's faces. But I do hope that if you don't have questions now, feel free to like definitely get our contacts, and you can either send direct messages or navigate and find us through OnDefend's resources. So I just highly recommend that if nobody wanted to speak up or even anonymously type something in the chat. Like we are free. We're here. We're happy to help. Really appreciate you guys sitting there listening to us drive this cruise ship, apparently, is our theme. So judge away. Also, I'm just really proud I snuck in YOLO twice into this, now 3 times. So thank you. I'm very proud of that fact. So
yeah, and I didn't even comment on it until right now.
you got to do it, right? You only live once. So there you go. Ryan, do you have anything?
4 times. That's 4 times.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I don't really have much to add. Other than BlindSPOT is a large platform with a lot of capability in it, and it's constantly growing. So unfortunately, in the case of this webinar, we only had like 35 or 40 minutes to kind of go through it. There's a lot of things you can do with it. Tabletops, purple teams, as Carly said, if you want to integrate it to a pen test, or maybe a red team, something along those lines, where you're going to do an engagement, compromise what you can, and then drop BlindSPOT actually on the host and see if the tools flag, or maybe you just want to do ransomware in a more controlled way.
That's a good point. You actually did make me, so I said I didn't have anything, and I know we kind of touched on it with the poll, but like the biggest thing that I saw both as the hands-on keyboard operator with IR, but in addition to like from a CISO perspective and trying to train like your SOC, 90% of SOC analysts, especially in their first or second job, have never seen real world adversarial tradecraft. They see like a little bit of junk, usually cyber hygiene stuff, like, I don't know, Joe Blow's working at 3 a.m. and he's not supposed to be kind of thing. And 9 times out of 10, it's like false positive stuff. And so the cool thing about BlindSPOT is like, you can really like, as the executive, do your RACI, do your risk profiling, right? From the risk management executive level and go, okay, maybe it's not Scattered Spider, but maybe my biggest risk is APTX. And with that, because of my infrastructure, this is what people care about. And I need to like train my team a little bit more of like what that would look like in the actual security stack that we have. And so the cool thing about BlindSPOT is that not only can you create like the customized style attack simulation, but you can also use our pre-canned ones that are a little noisier, I would say too. So like, I would say use the noise to tool baseline and then use the customization to like train people. And you don't even have to tell them. I mean, you could, but you could just not tell them, throw something at it and be like, what do you do? And we can even show you like how you could set up an entire host, like what we did, an entire test host where you actually could blow it up with actual commands and leave preventions off and see what that looks like, right? And you're not actually impacting your infrastructure. So that is something I did kind of want to sneak in there. And I know I would have loved to have had that when I was training and like coming up, because it honestly took a lot of really long nights and unfortunate real world incidents for me to gain a lot of the knowledge. And I think it would have been really awesome if I had had a little bit of a leg up from some type of like simulated, controlled, stressful environment to like actually see how I would react and what buttons to click and not to click in order to not upset leadership. So I think that would have been something that people could really benefit from. And it's sort of like a plug and play type tool. So anyways,
Yeah.
that's my spill.
Yeah, to that point, Carly, I mean, it's just like having cyber range, simulator time is great, but it is not a substitute for getting out there and flying your actual aircraft, especially in the place you're going to need to use it, in the real world situation. So yeah, it's always important to be able to train in your home environment, really give the defenders that home team advantage. Looks like we did get one additional question here in the chat, which is great. So we ran this on CrowdStrike. The question is, can we run this on other EDRs? Yes. So we picked CrowdStrike primarily because we like the red bird icon. We think it looks really cool. But yes, this workflow would have been completely appropriate for SentinelOne, Microsoft Defender, et cetera. Basically, any type of host-based endpoint security solution. BlindSPOT would do a great job of exercising its capabilities to both prevent and detect those types of threat actor activities. Good question.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, oftentimes, at least in the executive space, I think I was downrodden with like vulnerability management. Everybody preaches vulnerability management. And like patching, while yes, we all know that's super critical, there's change management process, there's risk of downtime and like all that impact. And I think like, at least for me, from my experiences with actually working incident responses, both from an executive like incident command level, all the way down to like the grunt on the computer, 9 times out of 10, it's like a misconfiguration. Whether that be in your firewall where you have like rules in the wrong order, or you have outdated rules, or all the way into your EDR where like, okay, your EDR alerted, but your threat hunters are looking at your SIM and your SIM didn't actually pull in the alerts from the EDR, or it only pulled in like a critical alert and you missed all the mediums and highs. And so I think it's really important to just show that oftentimes we just miss like the most obvious thing, which is the configuration. And so the cool thing about this is like, you can just run it as much as you want, when you want, and then you're able to actually go, hey, I have a baseline to go check out my configurations. And like it triggers your team to go look at that, which may not be like the normal thing to do, right? Like normally when we see activity, we just want to prove if it's real or not. And we don't really think about, well, where's the configuration? Like, did we accidentally set this up right? Like, are the lights all turned on, or is there some type of gap that's not working? So I think that's something that's really important. And it's like a big fix goes really far with like a little effort, and the risk is a lot lower than like fully updating like a Microsoft KB package that we all know sometimes takes down domain controllers, wink, wink. So anyways, so that's just something too, as like a little nugget that would have been cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Carly from, I think Ryan has seen this a little bit as well, but we've certainly encountered times where we go to run BlindSpot for customers, and then they realize that the system they pulled, like a spare laptop out of inventory or something like that, they'll pull that. Great, we'll run on this. It's exactly, the standard golden image for laptops. Fantastic. And because it's been offline in the box for 90 days, the EDR is not properly activated on it anymore.
Yeah.
Which then raises the question of, wait a minute, like how many other systems are out there that we don't know actually have the EDR fully on and working? Fun
And
fact, BlindSpot does super, super well against systems where the EDR is not currently on. So yeah, good one to fix.
awesome. Cool.
So, all right. Looks like we got another question here addressed to Carly. From the CISO perspective, how would you recommend justifying the spend of these kinds of attack simulations if it doesn't necessarily fit within the compliance box from a budgeting perspective?
Oh, that's a great question. I kind of want to say easy, but I would have to know like the full nuances of your environment to say if that's that easy. So I'll speak from state CISO hat. So anybody on here, I don't know if you're state CISOs or private CISOs. If you have ever been a state CISO, we have no budget. Okay, it is dirt. It is like chump change in the grand scheme of life. And there are so many regulatory things like you have to prove sole source, et cetera, et cetera. So totally tracking the compliance comment. With that, how I think you could position this specific product is that because it is vendor neutral and because it has multi-use case and the price tag is not that high, you could argue it for multiple things. And you would not have to necessarily purchase a subscription per se, rather than just like the agent itself on a certain matter of like endpoints and then run that within your program. And that could be used as often as you want. You could run something daily, you could run something quarterly, it could be an annual thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be compliance, but you could attach it to that training budget that we talked about. You could use it to help with cyber insurance negotiations or proof, right? Like we all know cyber insurance won't actually insure you unless you have like everything pretty much ready. And at that point, you don't need them. But this could be a really easy way to do that. And the budget is very reasonable, I would argue, compared to when you look for like a full stack of an EDR or full managed detection and response service or a full added premium feature onto a security stack that you already have. And the cool thing about the plug and play is like you don't have to keep it on the same endpoint. So you can run it on the endpoint, you can change your mind and go test a different environment with the same agent. And so that's what's really cool about BlindSpot, in my opinion. And then Zach, I don't know if I missed anything from the product installation methodology there, but from that CISO perspective, I think there's several ways you can argue it. And whoever asked that question, if you are open to sharing more about your environment and what you might be interested in doing, I'm happy to give any feedback that I might be able to help on.
From just from like the actual delivery side and the product itself, we organize BlindSpot into several different modules. You would have seen those kind of earlier in the webinar. Ryan was scrolling past them. So just be aware that there's, for some of them, like the daily validations and things like that, that rely more heavily on automation, is in kind of like a separate subset of the tool and has a slightly different deployment path, which are things that we help with. The thing about that that's great is that it's kind of like a mix and match model, right? Like if it makes more sense for your use case to be more X than Y, you can essentially elect for the corresponding modules that are appropriate for that and then shed costs in other areas until budget kind of allows for something to become enhanced a bit more. So, all right. And I think that's it for time, everybody. So thank you so much for attending and participating. With that said, please make sure that you follow OnDefend on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Be sure to engage with us, and we'll be sure to have more great webinars like this in the future. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.